only speak for myself, but I think it's about time we had a good fantasy movie. I mean, we've just had so many kind of burned out on all the social commentary movies we've had.
There was a shift in the country. It was post-Vietnam. Its sense of impotence in the wake of Vietnam and Watergate. People just wanted to feel that they had some control over their lives, you know? Or they wanted to see somebody who had it. Suddenly, there it was. Do we get to win now?
When Rocky came my way, there was a Great Depression in the land and frustration with Vietnam. Everybody needed an injection of hope and optimism.
People really got into that fight somehow or other. I mean, I saw people get up in an audience, you know, theater, they just, go, Rocky, go. You know, nobody even knows who won the fight.
Jaws was just a good adventure movie. The fact that it turned out to be, you know, the biggest moneymaker of its time, I don't think anyone knew that the fear of water was as strong as it was, and the movie just rocketed around the world. You could have played it in Delhi without dialogue, and people would get it.
And they were scared to death because it was a very expensive movie at the time. But once they started to show it, they were going to mass market this movie like crazy, and they did.
Jaws was the first time an A-budget picture, based on a bestseller even, opened in, you know, 1,000 theaters and went through the roof. It was the first time the studio said, wait a minute, why should we take a full-page ad out for one theater when we can take a full-page ad out for 100 theaters?
It was the beginning of, Jesus Christ, we can recover $100 million in 6 or 7 weeks. It was the beginning of getting elements and a window of time and a release date so that the parts became bigger than the whole.
And that's when there was this sort of feeding frenzy, speaking of Jaws, to buy studios and say, hey, wait a second, these guys, this is not just a tiny little industry. This has got big possibilities for big bucks later on.
Slow ahead. I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit.
We've never really gotten around Jaws. Trub was a very talented filmmaker, made a very good movie. And I won't say that the wrong lessons were learned, but the lessons were followed to a fault.
Star Wars is now part of our history. But money alone can't define its impact, particularly not for the hardcore Star Wars fans.
Star Wars cost $9 million to produce. It will bring in at least 10 times that amount. As a result, the price of 20th Century Fox stock has doubled in the last 2 weeks. The film is breaking attendance records all over the country. Not since Jaws have so many people stood in line to see a movie.
An entirely different audience was brought into the cinema. People came out of the walls and the woodwork and other places that were not going to films in those kind of numbers with the advent of Star Wars, which was 1977. People began to go to films 5, 6 times. It was almost a religious experience.
Star Wars, what did you think?
I thought it was great, really outrageous.
Special effects were super. They were good.
It's the best movie I've seen for a long time.
It was the most enjoyable experience I've had since I was a child. It was fantastic.
It was entertaining, and at the same time, it was something you could cheer with. It was good against evil.
Do you think it was escapist type entertainment?
Sure, I love it. That's my favorite kind of entertainment.
Bread and circuses, you know. So, I mean, people do look for escape. I mean, my mother, you couldn't drag my mother to see a sad movie, you know. She'd say, I'm not going to see that. She said, I got enough problems.
Feelers are being sent out and new patterns are being tried, and people are realizing that, you know, you can open a film in all these theaters, and you can make more money on the album, Saturday Night Fever, than you did on the film. And you can make more money on the merchandising, Star Wars, than you did on the film.
The feeling among the major studios in Hollywood, we've got to do more of this, and we've got to do them bigger and better.
There's only one Spielberg, you know, only one Lucas. And I think what happened there is that they all ran to that group. It's not the filmmaker's fault. It's those who wanted to cash in on that and use that as a gauging of what a success should be in Hollywood.
Heaven's Gate started the trend toward making the public conscious of the costs of a film. And the sense began to creep in that Hollywood in particular was a place of wretched excess.
There was a big to-do about Heaven's Gate. You know, it cost a lot of money. The film director had too much freedom, had too much money, had too much power, and a group was gonna, you know, come there and put the film director in its place.
Before any of it was ever viewed, people were all discussing the overages and how much it was costing. The picture never had a chance. Everybody was waiting to crucify it.
Overindulgence, they felt. Not every one of them, but some key people felt that. And so when Heaven's Gate came out, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, the film, and I think if you look at it now, you'd see a lot of very extraordinary things in it. It was killed in one night by the reviews. The critical establishment helped kill it. And they took some sort of a stand on that picture particularly.
Vincent Canby, who was a critic for the New York Times, who reviewed the cost of the movie more than anything else. And that sort of stuck, you know, in terms of criticism, and it pervaded everyone and everything.
The studio's fighting with the director. It was always in the papers. Why? What is that? That's the old story. A big picture, studio, director wants more. The studio says, let's try to keep it down. And then that just escalates, you know? Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes, who knows, sometimes it's greed.
And they were going to make movies now in which they were going to solve these problems, that the film director was not going to have the power, and that there was not going to be these runaway budgets.
I mean, we all made a picture or two that were more expensive than they should have been, and they didn't work. And then people said, well, maybe they don't know.
New York certainly didn't do very well, and that cost a bit, to say the least. Apocalypse Now, which is a great film, there were arguments about it when it came out. It wasn't completely, I guess, financially totally successful at the time. I'm not sure. It probably is now.
I think books have been written about what happened to these directors who made these little pictures like the way Peter did, and then the studio said, do anything you want.
Success brings an awful lot of pitfalls, and you make mistakes. And also, you know, people have asked what happened. Well, you know, we were all young, and we all got success very quickly, and we hadn't made that many pictures.
I think that they got rich and moved into Bel Air and got their Rolls Royces and started living high on the horse and forgot about regular people and how regular people live. I think that's what happens. Too much money, you know, a lot of ass-kissing. You know, everything you say is brilliant. You're invited to all the parties. You get to meet all the people. You get really flattered. Everybody tells you how great your movie is and how you're their hero, and, you know, they fall all over you.
They very quickly learned that the way not to be at the mercy of filmmakers is to do your own demographics and your own studies and to figure out what the audience wants. And so the whole marketing concept came right into the production facility.
So marketing became king. Something happened, which is that the aggressive lead in this area became the marketing division of a company.
And the best way they could come up with no risk was to make a movie in exactly the mold of the last one that had been successful, with exactly the stars.
Committees after committees and 9 producers and stuff look at the content. Oh, what about this line? We should change that line and put this in, and let's shoot 4 endings because we don't know how the movie's going to end. And until we test it, we don't know if it's any good.
No risk. There can't be art without risk. It's like saying, you know, it's like saying, you know, there's no sex and then expect there to be children.
You could no longer go in there and say, this is what you want, this is what you should be doing. They would say, no, we know what we should be doing. We know what we want. Now, how can you do this for us?
Suddenly, instead of having a movie that you could roadshow and put in a few theaters and build an audience for, They wanted to go for this big, wide distribution where they could do a national advertising campaign and bring all the money in a few weeks. And so the kind of movies that we had been making don't work in that kind of a system.
Blockbusters, you know, that's what they're going for. It's how much money can you bring in the first weekend and set a record.
The M in that always had stood for movies now stood for money.
Audiences were slowly educated to believe that good movies make money on opening weekend, bad movies don't.
Everyone, the public, is conscious of costs. And this is what gets reviewed in the newspapers every day, virtually. And not just the local, shall we say, company town papers, like the Trades and Variety, but the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and this gets picked up in St. Louis and Kansas City and Detroit. And wherever you go, people know how much a movie cost and how much it made. And they don't really talk as much, and certainly not on any level of depth, about the content.
Judging by the movies that are made that make money, I find that the audience taste is totally sentimental. I can't stand the feel-good movies, and they work one picture after another. Everything works every time.
MTV started to happen, and there was an impatience for linear narrative. You wanted to jump everything and get to the high point and then make everything a collection of high points. Why sit through the valleys? Let's just do peaks.
Audiences enjoy movies, and if they don't get high-quality movies, they'll enjoy whatever they get.
Hollywood films are, as you say, like Spider-Man, which Sam Raimi's films I like, actually, and I'm very glad that it was a big success. But it widens the gap because the amount of money that was spent, the amount of money that has to be made back on Spider-Man, the amount of money that could be spent, that could be made on it. I mean, you know, the studios are in, a lot of the studios are in, all the studios are in the business, being in the business to make some money.
In the old days, I guess, if you spent $25 million a year on production, you were running a small production company or, you know, reasonable sized production company. Now that's what you pay an actor.
Why do they cost so much? Because they're front loaded with huge salaries, huge fees. And the irony for me is that the studios seem to prefer making those movies to these $5, $6, $7, $8 million movies we're trying to make.
A lot of what's at stake now, even though it's to some extent unstated, is that a film has to serve the greater good of the corporation in order to get made. It, number one, cannot be subversive in nature. It, number two, has to have the broadest possible appeal today so that it will help other divisions of the corporation.
They're in the hands of these guys that run these corporations. Or, you know, they don't care whether it's a movie or a ski.
Studios were no longer making the films I wanted to make, and I was de facto an independent filmmaker.
And I think the future and the real future of film is the young filmmakers coming up.
Thank God for the independent film movement, because that's re-enlivening the art of cinema. Films like Memento, Hedwig and the Angry Inch, you know, that are really personal, interesting statements. You know, there's an artist at work there. And to me, that's what cinema should be. It should be one of the ways that the artist expresses to the culture what's going on with everybody.
There are occasionally independent films that do strike a chord in the public consciousness. But, you know, for the most part, it's a place where young filmmakers learn their trade so they can go on to make Hollywood-type features.
And what you have to do is, you know, here in this station is to retain your independence and take your time and do your films.
You yourself will grow, and you'll grow in other people's minds. That's the main thing. If you and in filmmaking, if they just get back to
looking at what's happening out there and making films, thinking about it and analyzing it. We have got the independence, so fingers crossed.
But as I say, it's a business, and you have to make money.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
If there's a couple of things I can say most about the 70s, what have we left the industry with? A lot of movies nobody's seen or really caught up with. But they make a statement, not just about that decade, but about those of us that are still marching, incidentally, and have now left a history, but are still making history.
If somebody's giving me a pot full of money to go and make a film, then I'm going to go and make that film as responsible a way as I know how. But if they start coming in and saying, oh, we've just hired Charlotte here, and she's the new head of blah, blah, and so I start getting notes, I mean, I just don't do it.
If you look at the titles of just the Academy Award nominees, let's say, it's a blend of films the likes of which we've never seen in this country. Never. Everybody started taking off in these different directions and doing these wildly disparate movies that were personally driven in a way, and not in any way factory, not product. They were the opposite of product.
I was gone for the 80s, so I don't know what happened. And went to very few movies during that decade. So I wasn't... I think it all ended because I left. I'm only kidding, folks.
I think the independent film world is where it's at now. Absolutely where it's at. You're getting wonderful, wonderful films out of it. And of course you're getting some that aren't so wonderful. But it's original. That's the thing, and that's what those 70s films were. They were original. Original means you've never seen it before.
I think there's some great big Hollywood movies that are just terrific, but there's a lot of them that are real crap too. There's a lot of independent films that are really crap. It's just being able to have an intelligent distributor, be able to cipher through, and also be able to give people an opportunity to see what they want to see.
I think it's wonderful that someone can make an ingenious, entertaining film that can make $100 million in a day. I bless them and admire them. But for that to be the entire cinema is like the entire pharmaceutical business being devoted only to tranquilizers and Viagra.
There has to be the personal statement. Otherwise, the culture is going unrepresented on a deep level.
I'm hoping to do Crouching Jew, Hidden Tiger, about a Jewish guy who starts to learn how to fly, a rabbi. But I don't know if I can get the money.
Every once in a while, there's this moment of like childish glee, and we say, oh, it's so great, like you can do this, and my God, film is so amazing. You take this piece and take that piece and put them together, and they turn into something else. That amazement is true. I mean, the cinema is like that. It is magic, and I think to always be capable of being an amateur, of being a beginner, means that you're always doing it for love and pleasure.
That's the thrill of filmmaking to me. The thrill of failure, potential failure. This may not work. Yeah, but if it does work, it's going to be terrific.
I'm always looking for younger people to do something completely new, to push cinema to its limits, to outside its limits, really. I remember when Akira Kurosawa got his Academy Award for his Lifetime Achievement, he said he was about 82 years old, and he said he's just beginning to realize the possibilities of film.
That's why it's so important to me that I do nothing else but crack through the original I'm working on, because I haven't done one since the conversation, and quite frankly, I don't know that I'm capable of it. So since I don't know that I'm capable of it, all the more I want to just say, well, I'm going to just keep trying until I do it or die.